Hello everybody, I'm Nicole O'Connor, and today joining us via Skype from Baltimore, Maryland is the Honorable Thurgood Marshall. Hello, Your Honor. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Tell me about you and your family.
I was born on July 2nd, 1908 in West Baltimore, Maryland. I was named after my grandfather, Thurgood Marshall, who was born a slave. I shortened my name when I was in second grade to Thurgood because I hated spelling out the name Thurgood. My father was named William, and he worked as a railroad porter. My mother was a teacher at an all-black school. I also had an older brother named William Avery.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school, I went to actually colored schools or all-black schools my whole life. I attended Coolidge Taylor Elementary School. I then went to Booker T. Washington Junior High School. Then I attended high school at Baltimore Colored and Training School. I was a member of the debate team and an outstanding student. I was also mischievous sometimes and misbehaved in class. My teacher sent me out of the room to force me to study the Constitution. My parents also very interested in the Constitution and made me study the Constitution of the United States regularly. By the time I graduated, I knew it by heart. I still remember it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do we ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. I married Vivian Berry in 1929 and graduated from Lincoln University with honors in 1930. I applied to the University of Maryland Law School. Despite my excellent qualifications and credentials, I was rejected due to my color. This was my first real encounter with racism and segregation. Instead, I attended law school at Howard University and graduated around 1933, I believe.
And what did you do after you finished school?
Well, I tried to establish my own law practice right out of law school, but I was inexperienced with that type of stuff. So in 1994, I started working with the Baltimore chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It's known as the NAACP. I worked with my mentor, a person who I looked up to and learned a lot from, Charles Houston, on the case of Murray versus Pearson. We won another qualified college student's admission to the University of Maryland, the same school I was rejected from for the same reason. We attacked their admission practice of segregation.
You must have been proud to earn that young person a place at that school.
I was. And in 1936, I moved to New York City. That case was kind of part of me because I wanted to get into that law school, and although I couldn't get into the school, I secured another young man's admission into it. He went on and did very, very well. He had a great promising career, and I felt that I was happy to be part of it. After that, I moved to New York City to work as legal counsel with the NAACP. Over the years, I won many, many cases. We fought against racism and helped inspire the civil rights movement that went on even into the 1960s, and you could still see it here today.
What was your first victory as a lawyer in front of the Supreme Court?
My first victory is one I'll never forget. It was around 1940. It was the case of Chambers versus Florida. I was defending a black man who had been charged with murder based on confessions coerced by the police. Another one of my Supreme Court victories was in 1944, Smith versus Allwright, where the Supreme Court entered the Democratic Party's whites-only primary elections in the South. These were important cases that I fought, argued, and won before the Supreme Court, And looking back now, I think it was a springboard to the entire civil rights movement.
And what would you say is your biggest victory?
Well, I'd have to say, and by far, my most famous case was Brown versus the Board of Education. Was a case that changed the course of American history, I believe, and paved the way for many young African American males to go through and get quality educations just like their white counterparts. This was filed by a group of black parents in Topeka whose children were found to go to all black schools. On May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that the separate but equal doctrine was unequal and violated the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. From then on, segregation in public schools was illegal. 1 year later, my wife tried, and my wife died. I'm sorry about that. And I remarried Celia, my secretary. We had 2 sons, Thurgood Jr. and John. But the most important part of that Brown versus Board education was that I was able to convince people the arguments that I made and the facts that I showed, that the doctrine of separate but equal was never true. Being separate can never be equal. That's why we fought to be integrated, to have one education system, not just one for one set of people and one for another. That case is the one I hold closest and dearest to my heart.
Inspiring. When did you become a judge?
Well, in 1961, President John F. Kennedy appointed me judge for the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. I served for 4 years. Then in 1965, President Johnson appointed me as the first black U.S. Solicitor General.
What does the Solicitor General do?
Solicitor General is the one who argues for the federal government before the Supreme Court. We represent the states, the United States, in any arguments that come before the Supreme Court where the state is a party to the action. It's a very highest position, and I was honored to obtain that position. I became friends with the Kennedys, and through the course of my relationship with the Kennedys, I saw that they were people who wanted to spring colored people or minority people forward, and they worked very close with me, and they paved their way to me. I was so sorry when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. It was a sad day for our country, and for black people all over.
And when did you become a Supreme Court Justice?
I'll never forget that day. It was on October 2nd, 1967. I was sworn in as a Supreme Court Justice. I served as a Supreme Court Justice for 24 years. In 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor became the first U.S. Supreme Court, the first female Supreme Court Justice, and worked alongside me. I retired in 1991 and was succeeded by Clarence Thomas, who still sits on the court today. You might remember when he was the subject of hearings for a long period of time, but he's also an African American man. Now, the Supreme Court as it sits now is somewhat more diverse than it was, throughout the 1900s, and I believe I was a springboard or a stepping stone, as part of that. Right now, even you have Justice Sotomayor, who's from New York City, from the Bronx, and she's upset that her grammar school that she went to is closing down. But now you have women, you have Latinos, and you have blacks. You have a representation of the population that sits on that court. I'd be proud, to see that court as it sits today.
Thank you, Your Honor. That was truly informative and inspiring.
You're welcome, young lady.
Thurgood Marshall died in 1994 at the age of 84, 3 years after retiring from the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall was one of the greatest civil rights leaders. Thurgood Marshall worked hard for racial equality and fought for it through the courts. People live out his legacy every day.